Radio host Bill Mick is known for his outspoken views and his ability to stir the pot on many issues. You can listen to him on WMMB AM, and he's a recurring guest on our show. Welcome to I Am Brevard. I'm Isadora. I sat down with Bill this week to talk about the West Melbourne Deputy Mayor's resignation following fraud charges, his support for a plan to arm school staff, and his views on Starbucks diversity training. Bill is certainly a conservative, but he's not afraid to criticize our Republican lawmakers and county commissioners. Watch. Bill, thank you for being on the show.
Sure, thanks for having me.
So let's start with probably the biggest news of the week is the school board finally deciding to schedule town hall meetings to discuss whether they will implement the school guardian program that Sheriff Ivey has proposed. I know you support Sheriff Ivey's proposal, but explain a little bit why you side with him.
In an active shooter situation, when you are trying to rely on one school resource officer, if you're fortunate enough to get one in every school, let's put the school resource officer in a situation he might find himself in. Let's go to Satellite High School. I'm familiar, that's where my kids went. The campus is about 3 blocks long, one end of it on A1A, the other end of it on South Patrick. If that school resource officer is back near South Patrick, near the football field, taking a burglary report at the concession stand or the field house, and the shooter enters from the entrance to the school off of A1A, he is a good 2, 3, 4 minutes away from responding. The question becomes, how many bodies are you willing to stack up until you have somebody to respond to that? You have a choice. You be a victim or you respond to it. School marshals will do that. The Guardian program will do that. And it's not like these are untrained people. They'll have better training than I got as a SWAT cop. They will have more concentrated training on this than I will have had to handle SWAT operations. They will be deputized by the Sheriff's Department or the local law enforcement agency. It's a smart move, and it's what needs to be done to stop that, should it occur here.
Well, there's a NYPD study that shows that cops only reach their target, like I believe only 18% of the time. Why will school marshals do any better? And are we putting ourselves in a situation where they might hit someone who's not the right target, or another student or another staff member?
That's possible happening when the policeman from the street enters. That's possible. These school guardians will have better and more intense firearms training than those street cops get. You can't guarantee there won't be a mishap, but I can guarantee you if you don't have a marshal there, you're going to stack up bodies in hallways. Which is your preference, to be able to respond or not?
But I think my understanding is that cops, I mean, their daily lives is all about being in that environment, where they're constantly confronting people. You know, educators or people who work in schools might not live in that environment. Doesn't that make a difference when you are in an active shooter situation where your motor skills are obviously compromised because you're nervous and you're shaking and you're trembling?
You think that doesn't happen to cops?
I'm sure it does.
Absolutely it does. When I was a drug cop, I had my sidearm in my hand every day, multiple times a day. There's discipline not to use it. Was I ever in a situation where I had to fire at anybody? No. It would be a first time for me, and I had 17 years on the job. There are many cops that will go through an entire career and never be involved in a shootout. The first one they have will be the first one they have. These marshals will be as well trained as any policeman who walks in the door. They will have intense training, they'll have intense backgrounds, they will have psychological examinations and drug tests, and those will be repeated throughout the course of their service in this capacity. It's the only thing that makes sense if you want to stop the shooter when it happens. We don't have enough cops to put in the schools. They're short of trying to put SROs in schools now by a large number of officers. And unless we have competent, trained personnel, who, by the way, are deputized by the Sheriff's Department after this intense training, after more training than I had to be a SWAT cop, those are the people I want to rely on. They're going to be capable of doing the job, as capable as the policeman. Yes, the policeman deals with confrontation every day. You telling me teachers don't deal with that in classrooms every day? Different level, different kind, but they're used to interpersonal reaction. Nobody's used to fighting in a situation where bullets are coming at you. It's new for everybody.
And let's talk a little bit about the politics around this plan.
Sure.
Sheriff Ivey obviously believes very strongly that this is the solution for school shootings, along with more SROs, obviously. I believe 2 weeks ago, he released a Facebook video, supporting the program. A week later, he tells the school board, let's table consideration of this. He says he's concerned that it gives them little time to talk about hiring more SROs, and it gives them little time to train these school marshals.
Correct.
What is your take? I read your column that ran last Sunday, in which you say that this was kind of a move by Sheriff Ivey to nudge the school board.
And it was a
to
good one,
action.
and it worked. Absolutely. I talked to the sheriff by phone on the show the day after this announcement was made, or maybe the day it came out in Florida today. And he said, look, I'm in support of all 4 prongs of this plan. The problem is the conversation has centered around only the school guardian program, leaving the other 3 prongs, the training, the school resource officer, and the other aspect. It's a 4-pronged plan, and the other 3 are being left behind while everybody just talks about, I don't want guardians in my school. He said, okay, let's table that. We'll come back and revisit it. Let's pass what we can, get the school resource officers started, because it's going to take them a while to hire and train those people. It will be much quicker to get marshals into the plan, but there is so much opposition from people who are ignorant about active shooter issues that don't offer a solution. Just, I don't want guns in the school. Okay, how are you going to stop the active shooter? They can't give you that answer.
You feel that kind of force school board members to say, okay, well, now we're going to actually consider this. Because the law was passed, I believe, a month and a half ago, and they haven't had any public hearings, any town hall meetings about this. And I think the public is getting very anxious that they're the only ones doing all the talking, although we've heard bits, just pieces of, what would be a stance by some of the school board members. But do you think that they've been sort of afraid to tackle this issue, given all this
No,
opposition?
I think they've been doing a lot of diligence and a lot of research into what's it going to cost, how are we going to pay for it, what's going to happen with the insurance rates for our liability insurance. The sheriff naturally will eat that because of the deputized marshals, but let's face it, lawyers are going to sue everybody because they're going for the deepest pockets they can find. So if you have that mishap you mentioned earlier, the lawsuits are going to come. Let's not pretend they won't. So you have to look at the insurance angle. They're looking at the cost and things like that. But it is time to act. We are running up against a wall where the school year is about to end. If you're going to train school personnel who won't be working through the summer at their normal job, if you're going to take them through that 5 weeks of training, he's going to run multiple classes, start a class 1 week, and then the next week start another. He says he could do 3 to 5 over the summer to have, and I don't know how big the classes are going to be. The sheriff says he can do 3 to 5 over the summer to get those marshals ready in place. So you at least have a marshal in play for every school, and then grow the program as you have the opportunity. It was a move to push the school board into action because right now they're dragging their feet. There are board members who are talking like they're giving it support. In reality, they're wavering and they're waiting. And if they could delay it, they would. But inaction here, if we would have an incident, leads to death. And they were elected to the tough job. Make the call. Do what you were elected to do, regardless of election outcomes down the road.
And it was a move that obviously it seemed to have worked, because the day after Florida Today calls some of the school board members, and we see that a majority of them leans, they're favorable to
allegedly.
the plan.
Allegedly.
And
I don't
we won't
buy
know until
all of
they
it.
vote. Yeah,
Right.
we don't know until they vote. And but let's talk a little bit about the sort of the politics. And I mean, it's obvious to me that the school board members are in a very difficult situation, and I do not envy them.
No, not at all.
And I think the legislature has put them in a really difficult spot, because you either do SROs at each school, or you can supplement that with school marshals. And obviously there's not enough money for Brevard to hire 51 new SROs that would be needed. So, and then you have this financial difficulty. The district is already faces a $4 million budget deficit, and now they got to come up with the money, maybe raise taxes. And then you have all these angry parents who come to your every meeting and scream at you. I mean, how do you read the situation of how they can proceed politically, given this is an election year and parents are going to be upset, and the most upset people usually are the ones who turn out to vote, right?
I don't see this as the legislature putting them in a difficult spot at all. This is the legislature giving them a viable option to protect our students. They need to make the right decision to do that. Yes, there is vocal opposition, but that opposition is coming from those who are ignorant of these situations that appear to have just a fear of guns. I don't want guns in schools. Who do you call when the shooter happens to show up? Oh, you call guys with guns. Why not have the guys with guns there and in place, trained better than most cops on the street are going to be trained and ready to take on the problem? That's where I want to see it go. Politically, is it a tough decision? You ran for the job. Make the tough call. Do what's right. It's about protecting kids.
Exactly, I agree with you. And then let's move on to this year's elections. I think if the election were held today, I think obviously Parkland would be a big issue. We don't know what's going to happen by November. It could be a completely different country by then. But how do you see Parkland today playing into these elections? We see that there's a new Brevard chapter of Moms Demand Action and some pretty angry people who might show up to vote, because we know anger and resentment usually motivate voters more than those who don't feel the same way.
That tends to be a short-lived piece of emotion, and come election time, it may not be a factor at all. I can't say how that will definitely weigh in. I think where you'll find it will weigh in is for Republicans who have been tabbed as tampering with the Second Amendment, with raising the gun buying age to 21, with adding a waiting period for all firearms, and banning the bump stocks or other accessories that are going to be seen as an infringement on the Second Amendment. It related to that, Representative Fine saying that he's going to move to repeal those issues. I find that a little odd, since he's the one who championed them for weeks before, well, for the week or two before they put that measure into play, and he was an adamant supporter of it. Now, I want to take those out. It's very inconsistent on his part. It looks like a political ploy on his part, and I think it has to do with him being a legislative rookie and not understanding how to play the politics, to be honest with you.
But what kind of political move do you think that is? He doesn't have a primary challenger.
He is,
so,
well,
which would mean like more people
he
who
doesn't have it yet. That's the other thing about talking about elections right now. I don't get into elections on my show until after the qualifying period's over with, because you don't know who's going to be in there. He may draw a challenger, he may not, but his base is not happy with him. The right Democrat runs in that race, I'll vote for the right Democrat in that race. Write that down.
You vote for a Democrat?
I've done it before.
Okay, we're going to get you on record that Bill makes it he'll vote for the right Democrat.
Ask Kendall Moore, I've done it.
And you know, you mentioned Democrats, and I think one of the things we've sort of noticed since at least last year is that this new enthusiasm among Democrats in Brevard, which is very unusual for a county like Brevard.
It is.
What do you see happening? Do you think they have a chance in this year?
Reality, no, because they're not doing it smart. They are being active, they're being loud, they're not being sensible, but they're being loud and they're being active for now. They did show up in some city elections and made a difference there. This is more about weakness in the Republican Party. My column that will come out later this week has to do with the Republicans. Where are you in this school safety debate? I've talked with one board member in particular who says nobody showed up at that board meeting this week to support the school marshal program other than 2 kids from Satellite High School who had the courage to stand there and take what the left was throwing at them during the meeting, ridiculing them for having the pro-marshal stance. Where are the alleged Republican leaders in this community standing up for the right side of this issue? They'll all tell you they support it. What have they done to support it? School board members aren't hearing about it. And I'm urging them to write their school board members, show up at these meetings. I think the road trip for the school board is a bad idea. I think I'm calling it the thank you, sir, may I have another tour, because they're just going to be beaten up by the public as they go. The time to have that informational meeting is after you've made a decision, so you can go tell everybody what it is and why you made it. Right now, they're just asking to be beat up along the way. So will it impact the election in August or November? Maybe, maybe not.
And what are the hottest races that you will be watching?
Governor's race is going to be interesting. Both primaries are going to be interesting for the governor's race. The general election will then certainly be interesting depending on who the candidates are. The race for the United States Senate is the most vulnerable Bill Nelson has been, because he's got the first viable candidate really to run against him. And while I have not been a big fan of Rick Scott's governorship over the 8 years, I expected more of the governor than what we got. Sadly, he learned some of the politics out of Tallahassee from the wrong people. Yet, given a choice of Rick Scott and Bill Nelson, I'll take Rick Scott all day long. He's beaten a dead horse on the term limits thing, but that's to his advantage, because he can paint Bill Nelson as old and out of touch, and he can say, hey, I'm the guy who just finished being governor. We had a good 8 years. We increased jobs like we said we were going to. Get me in the Senate. We need to change things up there. And I think that'll play well for the governor in that race. We'll see how it plays out.
I think definitely, and I think we're starting to see that he's trying to paint Nelson as a career politician. I
don't think you're painting that. It's just the reality.
But I wonder whether that sticks. I mean, in 2010, he was obviously a political novice, but after 8 years in office, you know, someone may argue that you are now a politician.
I said that on my show. It's like the 8-year governor saying we don't need career politicians. Okay.
And someone who has put up so much of his own money to run for
Absolutely,
governor
yes.
and possibly also in the Senate race.
And I don't think overall he did a bad job as governor. I just don't think he played the politics well. I think he was great during
What
the
makes you
hurricanes
say
last
that?
year. He had yes men around him. He had people who wanted to protect him. He had an appearance on my show early in his governorship, and I called one of the guys in his office and said, look, I don't think he had a really good appearance here. I took him off script and he didn't know what to say. He's got to be in touch. He's the governor. And the guy wanted to defend it to the hilt, wanted to yell and argue with me. I said, look, I'm a fan of the guy. I'm just trying to help him out. It wasn't a good appearance. Well, we listened to it. We think it's great. Well, that's when I started thinking that the governor was the emperor with no clothes, because he had people around him protecting him from the truth, and that's not good.
I think Scott has been known for not being good going off script, but I'll tell you, I mean, he's gotten a lot better. He's a lot more
has, most
personable than
certainly.
he was
He
when
is.
he first got elected.
And of these two candidates, he'll be the best one.
Yeah. So let's.
Write that down. Isadora said that.
I am not saying, I am actually very interested in this election. It's obvious, like you said, this is the first time that Nelson has a true challenger.
Yeah.
And I think he is the most vulnerable Democrat in the Senate. This is going to be watched nationally. So
It will be.
a
And
lot
the
of
Democrats
attention
are
in
going to dump a
Florida.
lot of money into that race. They will. Will the Republicans get behind Rick Scott? Well, I think they'll rely a little bit on his money, but I hope that they get behind him.
Which he seems to have plenty.
Sure.
So let's move on back to Brevard.
Sure.
One of your favorite issues, not favorite issues, but one of the issues that you care about is political corruption.
Absolutely.
Just this week, the West Melbourne vice mayor resigned after he was charged with a scheme to defraud $20,000.
Yes.
This is a story that we have been following for quite a bit. Explain a little bit of the background and what is going on in Brevard. We have all these cases. This keeps happening.
You have among some in the elected class that believe they're above the law and above being answerable for the things that they do. We've seen several examples out of West Melbourne through the years. And John Tice, the former vice mayor, former councilman, having just resigned the council seat, he stepped away from the vice mayor's job the day after his arrest. But I'm sorry, the vice mayor is just another councilman with his stick. When the mayor's not there, he can pound the gavel. They all have the same weight in a vote. So if you're not qualified to be the vice mayor, you're not qualified to be a city councilman. He made the decision about vice mayor. Thank goodness he got to this decision. But the whole charity situation with Honor America, and then his own charity, the Brevard Hall of Fame, that he was running inside of that charity, had to do with a roof job at the city of Melbourne that was overcharged to begin with, and then money kicked back to him in the form of a check when it was made out to Honor America. He says, no, you got to make it out to the Brevard Hall of Fame. They changed the check. He takes it, cashes it, uses it for personal use as far as the charges are. $7,000 and 4 felonies associated with it. It's about time we see this. We've had a reluctance in Brevard for a long number of decades, before I even got here in '98, that political prosecution just was not palatable to the state attorney's office. I was hopeful Phil Archer would be stronger on this. We've seen the Needleman case. We've seen this case now. Let's hope that they follow up this investigation, because I think there are other political heads to roll here. He's not the only one who was playing in those two particular charities. So I think there's more to dig into.
And he called the charges politically motivated, which seems to be sort of the go-to accusation that a lot of people who come under these charges seem to make. And I think Kurt Smith and Jim Barfield, when there were ethics complaints filed against them over their financial disclosure forms, they sort of made the same allegations.
Two different things here.
Two different, and I know that you
One
talked
involves
about
criminal behavior. The complaints filed by Matt and I on behest of John Tobiah on Smith and Barfield is basically a clerical test for candidates and elected officials.
Yeah.
Do you fill the form out right? And if you don't, it's an ethics complaint. Doesn't involve actual ethical behavior. It's not as if they were trying to hide something. They didn't follow the form exactly correctly. They both paid their fines. It's over and done with, but it's a political tool in that case. In the case of Tice, he committed an actual crime that's not only ethical, it's dishonest, it's unethical rather, it's dishonest, it's criminal behavior, it's stealing. So let's get after it. Let's find out who else is involved.
And speaking of John Tobiah, Commissioner John Tobiah, he wants county employees to be able to carry guns. That would obviously require a county policy change. Your thoughts on it?
Another political trick by John Tobiah, who likes to campaign from the dais. He knows Kurt Smith 2 years ago, when they reviewed this policy, voted no, we don't want to arm county employees. Smith is now ready to vote yes if Tobias gets this change in front of the commission. So he'll use that as well, he's a flip-flopper. He voted no and now he's voting yes. The answer to that is environments change. We're seeing people walk into government buildings, schools in particular, and kill people on a fairly regular basis. And who wants to take the right of people to defend themselves away from them? It makes sense to allow that to occur.
It seems that a lot of what John Tobias does on the county commission is politically
Absolutely,
motivated.
absolutely.
And let's a little bit of background. Kurt Smith is running against former Commissioner Trudy Infantini this
Actually,
year.
the other way around, since he's the incumbent. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. She's challenging him, and obviously Tobias has made it quite clear that he doesn't want Kurt Smith to be a commissioner anymore. One of the things that John Tobias did just recently was that he wanted to divert money from tourism projects that had already been approved, take that money and put towards the Indian River Lagoon. That proposal was rejected by the county commission because they had already pre-approved all these projects. My interpretation is that this vote by Kurt Smith could easily show up in attack ad against him.
Sure it will.
You know, as someone who doesn't do anything to protect the lagoon. But do you see merits in moving money from tourism into the lagoon?
Yes, but not this particular vote.
Why not?
Yes, there are tourism dollars that can be diverted and will be beneficial to tourists and the tourism industry for roads and the things. Yes, some could be diverted to the lagoon as well. How about for the infrastructure that feeds waste into the lagoon? I think that would be wise. Let's not pretend that tourists don't come here and not use the toilet. Okay, they do, and that impacts what's going on. So there's a legitimate reason to do it. The TDC has to sign off on any such proposal.
The Tourism Development Council Commission.
And in order for that to happen, it's going to have to be palatable to both them and the county commission. This money that was set aside for these fields has been set aside for some time. And as Kurt was explaining it to me one day, I talked to him about this. He said, look, because you have one child who is sick and you're taking care of that child, the lagoon, doesn't mean you don't feed the other children. You know, you got to try to keep them healthy too. In this particular case, those tourism dollars going to those fields will enhance the tourism in Brevard simply because of all of the teams and all of the people that are brought into that complex in Vieira on a regular basis now by USSSA, bringing all those tournaments and events into that area. It makes sense to make those fields playable as much as they can be with artificial turf so you can play in winter and in snow, in rain and bad conditions, because you can't do that on a natural field in most cases. So the cry of the lagoon is dying, that's Chicken Little by John Tobias on the county commission to try to point at an issue, much like Randy Fine has been trying to do from Tallahassee. They appear to be in collusion on this particular issue.
Yeah, and Randy Fine last year when the county commission originally approved these projects, he went before them and said, why aren't you using the money for the lagoon? Remember
different
Hurricane
projects.
Irma?
Those were the Titusville projects and the like, not the Vieira Field project.
And that was what John Tobias was trying to do this week. That includes $7 million for indoor multi-use sports arena in downtown Titusville. Also includes money for the Palm Bay Nature Center and campground and a few others. Randy Fine was the one who originally said, let's take money away from these projects, put into sewage infrastructure. This was right after Hurricane Irma and the sewage spill that was horrific here. Do you see all of this as just political ploy by Randy Fine?
Yes, I do. I do. He has gone to Tallahassee as a rookie representative, and he believes he's the policeman of local officials, and he's wrong. You know, they've got their job to do. They've got their dollars to allocate on the local level. He sets the law and policy in Tallahassee as to how it happens. If he doesn't like it, he needs to talk to his county commissioners like I would if I had an issue. Instead, he tries to bully them from Tallahassee into doing what he wants done. Randy's got a lot to learn, and he's a friend. I like Randy Fine. I think he's a good man. I think he's a rookie legislator who has made some mistakes and needs to learn from them, but he's not learning from them, and he's becoming a bully to these local officials, and I don't like it. It needs to change. And I've talked to him about it. I've yelled at him about it, and we just have a lot of fun in the conversation.
And Randy Fine is definitely one to watch. Under the new speaker, I can definitely see him having some sort of more leadership role. So that remains to be seen.
Which is why he didn't hold to principle on the Second Amendment when he passed the school safety bill. The Second Amendment didn't matter, and all of a sudden now it matters again because he realizes he lost ground with conservatives with that particular vote.
And we have just a couple of minutes left, but let's talk about Starbucks.
Okay.
Closing all of its stores on May 29th to conduct diversity training after a store manager asked 2 black men to leave their store. Apparently they were there to use the bathroom, and the store manager told them to leave if they didn't purchase anything, and ended up calling the police.
My understanding was they've been sitting there a while,
They were
too,
sitting
correct?
there saying that they were waiting for a friend who showed up after the police got there. What are your thoughts on it? You being a cop, seems to me that the cops did what they're supposed to do, that the heat has been on Starbucks itself.
Yeah, I have a friend who says the left always eats its own, and we know how left-leaning Starbucks as a corporation is. Now they're being bit by that politically correct bug that they like to throw around at everybody else. This is a situation in an area of Philadelphia where they have a problem with this kind of issue. As a story I read this morning led me to understand, Starbucks actually has a special policy in this particular area where the manager can make the decision, hey, it's time for you to go, you need to leave, and ask for law enforcement help if necessary. That's what appears to have occurred here. This is not a racial issue. This is a customer relations issue. They're falling on the politically correct sword when they ought to be teaching customer service, kindness to everybody. It doesn't matter about race. Kindness to all your customers. You're trying to sell everybody who comes in there stale pastry and bad coffee. So be as nice as you can, because
You're saying you don't like Starbucks coffee?
yeah, pretty much. You know, for $5
You
a
might
cup.
you might guess. I agree with you.
$5 a cup? No,
Still good
it's
coffee.
bad coffee. It's horrible. Until they came up with the blonde stuff, and I haven't even tried that because I don't go spend my money there. I just don't. You know, I can get a K-cup of McCafe coffee, 50 cents, and I'm good. Let's go. It's great. Anyway, they need to focus customer service, common sense, and being kind to everybody. It's not a racial issue like everybody wants to make it. Kind of interesting to see them being bitten by their own.
So you won't be upset that you won't get your Starbucks coffee on May 29th.
Not at all.
Good to know, Bill Mick. Thank you for being with me today.
Always fun. Thanks for having me.
That's our show for today. My thanks to Bill Mick for joining me in the studio. If you have questions regarding today's episode, contact me at irangel@floridatoday.com. And be sure to join us again next week right here on WEFS and on floridatoday.com. Also look for the Eye on Brevard podcast on our website, SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play Music, or the Stitcher Radio.